Maya Johnson thought she was driving through an ordinary Seattle morning, but one black SUV turned her routine into a nightmare that would shake the city to its core. Seattle was waking slowly under a blanket of gray clouds, the city's usual dampness clinging to the streets and buildings. The early morning air was sharp and fresh, carrying the scent of rain from the night before. Maya Johnson maneuvered her small car through the quiet avenues, her mind already focused on the day ahead. As a dedicated community activist, she had spent years trying to make her neighborhood safer, fighting for better lighting on streets, secure housing, and programs for youth. Today, as agenda included a meeting with city officials, a meeting she hoped could finally turn months of advocacy into real change. Traffic was still sparse, but the city had begun its slow hum. Commuters hurried along sidewalks, umbrellas bobbing in rhythm with the drizzle, while delivery trucks rumbled past, their engines echoing off brick buildings. Maya kept her hands steady on the wheel, carefully scanning for cyclists and pedestrians, a habit she had developed over years of being aware of every small detail around her. She was used to keeping an eye out, but something about this morning felt different. At first, it was just a vague unease. A black SUV appeared behind her at the light, following at a distance that was close enough to make her notice. She told herself it was nothing coincidence, random traffic, but as she drove on, the SUV remained close. It matched her every turn, every stop, every acceleration. Other cars seemed to give them room, instinctively sensing tension, yet Maya tried to push the thought aside. She focused on her plans, the documents she needed for the meeting, the speeches she might make, the changes she hoped to see. As she moved further into the city, the SUV's presence grew more noticeable. It wasn't just behind her anymore, it mirrored her movements with an almost unnatural precision. Maya's pulse quickened, though she tried to stay calm, telling herself she would soon be at her destination and this would all fade away. But a growing sense of being watched made her tighten her grip on the steering wheel. Every red light, every turn, felt heavier than it should. A simple drive to a meeting had begun to feel like a test of patience and nerves. Unseen by Maya, someone's anger was brewing behind the tinted windows of the black SUV. The calm city streets, the morning's mundane rhythm, and the predictable flow of traffic were about to collide with a force she had not anticipated. A quiet morning drive was turning into the first step of an event that would shock the city and leave an entire community grappling with fear, questions, and the fragile nature of safety. By mid-morning, the streets of Seattle had grown busier, the hum of engines and occasional blaring of horns filling the air. Maya navigated through a crowded intersection, trying to stay calm despite the sense of unease that had been building since her morning drive began. The black SUV from earlier remained close behind her, moving with unnerving persistence. Other drivers cast wary glances, sensing the tension between the two vehicles, but none could predict what was about to happen. The SUV started weaving aggressively, cutting dangerously close to Maya's car. Each swerve and sudden acceleration made her stomach tighten. At one point, it slammed into the lane beside her, forcing her to brake sharply to avoid a collision. Panic began to creep in. The driver behind her wasn't just aggressive, they were focused, deliberate, almost predatory. Maya's heart raced as she tried to find a way out, scanning the streets for a safer route, but traffic had thickened. Cars honked and swerved. Pedestrians paused on sidewalks, and the tension in the air became almost tangible. At a red light, the SUV pulled up directly behind her, blocking her escape. The tinted windows made it impossible to see the driver's face, but the movement inside the vehicle suggested someone was ready to act. Maya's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her mind raced, searching for options, calculating distances, trying to anticipate every possible scenario. She felt trapped, the bustling city now a maze of danger instead of opportunity. Then, in an instant, the situation escalated. The SUV's door opened abruptly, and before Maya could react, a shot rang out. The sound echoed against the buildings, startling nearby pedestrians and drivers. Panic erupted on the street as people ducked for cover, unsure where the danger had come from. Maya felt a sharp pain and everything blurred, her body collapsing against the seat. The world around her became chaotic, a mix of screeching tires, shouting voices, and the wail of distant sirens growing louder. Within moments, the SUV sped away, disappearing into the labyrinth of Seattle streets. Witnesses stood frozen, struggling to understand what they had just seen. Some called 911 immediately, others tried to offer help, but the scene was chaotic and surreal. What had appeared to be a simple case of road rage was now clearly more than that, an intentional, targeted act. The first responders arrived quickly, lights flashing and voices urgent, but the sense of shock lingered in the air. A quiet morning drive had erupted into a violent event, one that would send shockwaves through the city, and set in motion a chain of investigation and revelation that no one could have anticipated. The investigation into the shooting began immediately, with detectives arriving at the scene to collect evidence and interview witnesses. The intersection was still chaotic, but the flashing lights of police vehicles and the steady hum of radios brought a sense of controlled urgency. Investigators combed the area for any clues: the direction of tire marks, discarded shell casings, and security camera footage from nearby businesses. Witnesses described the black SUV and its sudden, violent exit, but the driver's identity remained a mystery, obscured by tinted windows and the brief, chaotic nature of the attack. As detectives examined Maya's car, they noticed signs that suggested more than a spontaneous road rage incident. The windshield bore faint but deliberate scratches, and traces of paint indicated the SUV had brushed dangerously close before the shot was fired. Investigators began to suspect that Maya had been followed and observed prior to the attack. Their suspicions were confirmed when neighbors reported seeing the SUV parked near her apartment several days before the shooting. It became increasingly clear that someone had been tracking her movements, studying her routine, and waiting for an opportunity. The detectives also delved into Maya's life and activism. She had been a vocal critic of unsafe development projects and had publicly opposed several city policies. Social media posts revealed heated debates and occasional threats from strangers, but nothing concrete had suggested immediate danger. Initially, police considered the possibility that her activism might have made her a target. However, the randomness of road rage incidents could not be ruled out entirely, leaving investigators with multiple angles to explore. Forensic teams analyzed the bullet and determined it had come from a high-powered handgun, consistent with a calculated attack rather than a panic-driven act. The SUV itself became a central focus, and detectives traced its registration to a local man, though his motives were still unclear. Phone records, social media interactions, and past disputes were all examined to uncover any connection between Maya and the suspect. Every piece of evidence pointed to one undeniable fact: this was not an accident. Someone had planned to confront her, and the attack was intended to send a message. The investigation moved forward like a puzzle with missing pieces. Each lead opened new questions. Who had orchestrated the attack? Was it truly related to her activism? Or did personal grudges play a role? Detectives worked tirelessly, aware that the answer could reveal a hidden network of obsession, revenge, and danger. The city held its breath, waiting for the moment when the pieces would finally come together, and the truth behind the violent road rage shooting would be revealed. Weeks into the investigation, the detectives finally had a breakthrough. Forensic analysis revealed that the bullet had been fired from a handgun registered to a man named Michael Rivers, a local resident with a history of minor traffic disputes. At first, Michael seemed like an ordinary figure, someone unlikely to escalate a road rage incident to such extremes. But as detectives dug deeper, a more disturbing picture began to emerge. Michael's personal life had been quietly turbulent. He had a sister who once ran a small business that had been affected by a development project Maya had actively opposed. The project had received city approval despite Maya's campaign to stop it, leaving Michael's sister struggling financially. At first, this connection seemed coincidental, but investigators noticed that Michael had been increasingly fixated on Maya in the weeks leading up to the attack. Social media posts, forum comments, and surveillance footage indicated he had been tracking her movements, learning her routines, and observing her interactions with the community. The notion that the shooting was spontaneous quickly evaporated. Evidence suggested careful planning. Michael had waited for the right moment, a congested intersection, a moment when Maya's attention was on her destination, when the chaos of traffic would give him an advantage. It became clear that the road rage scenario was a fraud, a carefully constructed story meant to mislead both witnesses and authorities. The act was not merely one of impulse. It was revenge disguised as random violence. Detectives also uncovered Michael's growing resentment and obsession. His resentment toward Maya had festered over months, fueled by a sense of injustice and failure. Records revealed visits to gun stores, searches for traffic accident scenarios, and notes tracking Maya's schedule. The calculated nature of his actions painted a chilling picture of a man willing to cross every moral boundary to exact personal revenge. The revelation shocked the investigators. What initially appeared to be a random and senseless act of road rage was in fact a meticulously orchestrated attack, driven by personal vendetta rather than public or political animosity alone. The city's sense of safety, already fragile after the shooting, was now further shaken by the realization that the threat had been targeted, intentional, and disturbingly close to home. As detectives pieced together Michael's plans and motives, the story transformed from an act of chance into a cautionary tale about obsession, revenge, and the hidden dangers that can lurk behind everyday life. Authorities finally tracked Michael Rivers to a secluded rental cabin on the outskirts of Seattle. The arrest was executed quietly, without confrontation, but the tension surrounding it was palpable. For weeks, investigators had been following his movements, piecing together a trail of evidence that painted a clear picture of his obsession and intent. The capture of Michael brought a measure of relief to the city, but it could not erase the lingering fear and shock caused by the attack. Maya survived the shooting, though her recovery was long and difficult. Physical wounds healed faster than the mental scars, and she found herself grappling with a newfound vulnerability. The attack had been more than a random act of violence. It was a direct challenge to her life, her mission, and the work she had devoted herself to for years. Yet, even in the midst of fear and pain, Maya's determination remained unshaken. Her experience became a catalyst, intensifying her commitment to community safety, responsible gun control, and programs that addressed aggression and conflict before it escalated to violence. The city of Seattle was left to process the unsettling reality that an act which had initially appeared random was anything but. People questioned how ordinary tensions, grudges, and personal vendettas could escalate into such extreme violence. Media coverage amplified the sense of urgency, emphasizing the vulnerabilities faced by public figures and activists, and prompting conversations about security, mental health, and the impact of unchecked anger. Michael's trial exposed the extent of his planning and fixation, revealing a man who had meticulously tracked his target and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The courtroom proceedings were tense, drawing attention from across the state as prosecutors detailed the months of observation, planning, and stalking that had led to the shooting. The verdict, when it came, was definitive. Justice had been served, but the story left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Maya's story became a symbol of resilience in the face of targeted violence. Her advocacy work continued, now intertwined with her personal journey of survival. The community rallied around her, inspired by her courage and her refusal to be silenced by fear. Seattle learned a difficult lesson that safety can be fragile, and the consequences of obsession can be devastating. Yet through the chaos, hope endured, showing that even after a life is threatened, determination and courage can shine brighter than fear. The attack became a defining moment, not only in Maya's life but in the city's collective consciousness, reminding everyone that vigilance, resilience, and unity are essential when confronting the darkest facets of human behavior.